I have a gun. It's loaded. Shut up.
They're a couple at the end of their marriage.
Shut up! We haven't had sex in quite a while.
What are we, girlfriends here?
He's a criminal.
You want to have sex with him?
At the end of his rope.
I just beat up Santa Claus.
Denis Leary. The ref.
What's that?
It's nothing.
It doesn't feel like nothing.
Void. Animal.
Sneak preview this Friday.
In a world where podcasts reign supreme, two friends dare to ask, do you even movie? Hosted by filmmaker Henrique and movie aficionado David D. Neuer. Spoiler alert.
Hello, my friends, and welcome back to Do You Even Movie? I am your host, Henrique Couto, here with my buddy, Double D, David Denoyer.
Greetings and happy holidays.
Happy holidays indeed. Smell cat piss?
I do not smell cat piss.
Reference to the movie we are watching tonight, or we're talking about tonight. We already watched tonight.
Yes, we did.
As the second film in our holiday deluge.
Yes.
And but before we get to that, I just want to tell you I'm a little hurt.
You're hurt
by your actions.
My actions of what?
Well, I recently had my second cold of the year.
Yes, you did.
And I'm still. Last week you could hear how bassy I sounded.
Yeah.
Now I'm completely unsick and congested.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm hacking stuff up all day long. It's honestly one of my favorite hobbies.
I bet.
But I'm just a little sad because, the last time I got sick, we both were sick, and we couldn't figure out who gave who the illness.
Yeah.
Because we saw each other on Sunday and Tuesday and Friday.
Yeah.
I think it was. And we were sick or something like that.
Yeah.
No, it was Friday, Tuesday.
Sunday, Tuesday, yeah.
So there was just no way to know who was the first ill person. But that means there's a 50-50 chance you gave me that illness.
It wouldn't be surprising.
And then you didn't get sick from my being ill, which is not cool. I don't appreciate you opting out.
If I can bring my complaint to this chat, I have chapped lips for the first time in God knows how fucking long.
Well, Lord knows what you've been doing with those damn things.
Legitimately, I have Bert's, what is it?
Beeswax?
Beeswax, yeah, Bert's beeswax in my pocket right now, because I've not had chapped lips in I don't know how long.
Even in the winter?
Even in the winter.
Most people wear chapstick in the winter.
In the winter, yeah. And I cannot tell you literally the last time that I got chapped lips to this degree where it's just I woke up and knew that I had chapped lips. I can feel them all the time now. And that's my problem.
To be you, David.
I know, it's so awful. But yeah, you've been sick for a bit now.
Well, the problem is when you have a problem with your throat.
Yeah.
And then you talk 5 hours a day, it doesn't tend to get better.
No.
Even if the rest of you gets better, the throat stays in rough shape.
Yeah.
So that's what I've been dealing with. I used to think that your voice got, that kind of baritoneness when you were sick. I used to think it was because of congestion and phlegm.
Yeah.
Phlegm for those listening on headphones. Phlegm. But it turns out, and everybody's gonna be like, no shit, but I didn't know this. It's actually because your vocal cords are swollen. So they're physically bigger.
Yeah.
So they make more bass because of the size of them. And it's awful.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And it doesn't get better if you talk hours a day.
Yeah.
So
you really don't have a way around that.
Well,
either.
in October it was pretty bad, and now in December we're running a ton of bonus shows at Weekly Spooky.
Yeah.
So it has been a journey. This weekend I had to record the least amount I could get away with and try resting my voice. And I'm just now about to my normal level of bass.
That is true.
No, and I don't get sick a lot.
You don't.
This one was definitely Rachel's fault. She gave me this illness after not getting sick the last time I was sick.
Yeah.
Which was extra weird because she like lived in the same house and never got sick.
Never got sick.
But this go around, it has not been a good time.
It has not. We even had to miss our Thanksgiving marathon, but we made up for it this past Sunday because we watched 2 movies that were pretty fantastic.
We did, although for the record, I never canceled our Thanksgiving marathon. We just never put it on the books.
Well, I knew you were not feeling good because I hadn't heard from you.
Well, that was the weekend of.
Yeah.
Though. Yeah. I mean, I was very, very sick.
Yeah.
But yes, we watched 2 films.
Yeah.
Worth talking about. One
Absolutely.
worth talking about a lot.
Yes.
Which would be 2024, this year's Nutcrackers.
Yes.
Directed by David Gordon Green.
And starring Ben Stiller.
And starring Ben Stiller in his first starring role in 7 years.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Because it seemed like for a while there, you just couldn't get away from him.
Well,
Was his last big one? Shit, man. What was that movie called? Welcome to Tomorrow with Steve Carell.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think what his last big movie was then, if it was 7 years ago.
Was it that World of Walter Smitty or whatever?
Maybe that's what I'm thinking. No, Walter Smitty, I think, was
or something like that.
I think it was, now I'm curious.
Oh boy,
You
now
talk
Dave's
amongst
got to
yourself.
dive into the crap. But excuse me, I was trying to not cough into the microphone. But Nutcrackers is a heartwarming Christmas time tale filmed in Wilmington, Ohio, which is 40 minutes from where we're sitting right now.
Yeah.
Filmed with a lot of local people, starring local children of the area. And Ben Stiller, as we mentioned, it's about a family kind of reconnecting through tragedy.
Yeah.
Ben Stiller plays a business-focused family member who has to come to a little town in Ohio to figure out what to do with his sister's orphaned boys. She has 4 boys.
Status is the last movie.
What was it called?
Brad's Status.
Yeah, I never heard of that one.
That was one, I think it was like an indie. I think it was the one with the drug, the son that's on drugs that he's trying to help.
Oh, I watched that.
Yeah.
It was good.
I've heard it's good, yeah.
No, I did watch that. That was really good.
So yeah, I think that was his last one though. That was 2017.
Wow. Yeah. So it's been a while since he'd starred in a film. And I just found the movie to be charming, extremely funny.
Extremely funny.
And what you'd expect from David Gordon Green. It was very it had a lot of great bizarre humor, a lot of dark humor, and but always hits you in the heart at the end.
So much heart hitting. My God.
Yeah, and it's available on Hulu right now. So I do recommend you check out Nutcrackers, especially if you need a brand new holiday film to really just punch you in the feels and not let go. So what did you think of it?
15 minutes was, I mean, like the whole movie was great, but that last 15 minutes, which is the performance and everything, just so sweet. Ben Stiller's so good in it because not only is he showing up and kind of like really doesn't want much to do with the kids at first, but then through the movie just kind of like befriends them, finds out how cool they are, how talented they are. I mean, just a great display of
and that part is honestly the most cliche part of the whole movie, but the way it's done is very fun and offbeat.
Yeah.
And I really loved that about it.
And has a fair amount of David Gordon Green alumni in it because you've got the one guy from Halloween that I can never remember his name.
I mean, there
was like 3 or 4.
He's got his crew.
Yeah, he's got a few people that,
and co-starring Linda Cardellini.
Cardellini, yep.
I loved it.
Yeah.
I just really, possibly in my top 10 of the year.
So good.
I'm going to rewatch it next week.
As you should.
So, but the other one we watched is one that's been taking social media by storm.
Yes, it has.
A little Netflix movie, for those who've heard of Netflix, called Hot Frosty.
Hot Frosty indeed. And I fucking love that title.
It's the perfect title.
It is the perfect title, absolutely.
So why don't you give the rundown on Hot Frosty?
So Hot Frosty, according to IMDb, is the story of Widow Kathy magically brings a snowman to life. His innocence helps her heal and find love again. They bond before the holidays, but he's doomed to melt. That's a terrible synopsis, in my opinion, I think.
But that's accurate.
It's accurate, but there's so much more to it because even though it has the romantic comedy elements and whatnot, he literally helps the entire town, befriends the entire town.
It's like the story of Frosty the Snowman.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. He was a holly jolly soul.
He was a holly jolly soul. And the
with
movie
pecs.
The movie stars Lacey Chabert and Dusty Milligan. Lacey Chabert, of course, from Mean Girls, and Dusty, who you may remember as Ted from Schitt's Creek. He plays the snowman in it. And it was one of those movies that I wanted to see solely because when I heard the title and heard about the synopsis, I was like, this sounds like it could be really bad or really fun.
Yeah.
And it was really fun.
It was super, super fun. It hits all the notes you expect from a holiday rom-com. I'm very partial to holiday rom-coms.
As am I.
And I got a very big kick out of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, and you want to talk about brilliant writing.
Mm-hmm.
Having Frosty be like a buff, hot dude.
Yeah.
And then having him be constantly cold or needing to be cold.
Needing to be cold, yeah.
Is the perfect recipe for him to basically never have a shirt on during winter.
Yeah.
But I really felt for that actor because some of those scenes, it looked like it was legitimately very cold.
Well, and two of the best kept secrets of the film are Craig Robinson and Joe Latrulio, because them as the cops, bunch of comic relief for one, but also Craig Robinson's trying to find out one of the crimes that Frosty committed in the beginning of the movie, the entire movie, and is just this cop that's just trying to solve the case at all costs, but also cliche to every single like movie cop of like saying the one-liners, putting on sunglasses.
Well, he's trying to.
Waiting.
Yeah. He's failing to be that cliche cop. And they also set him at a keyboard a couple of times and let him just riff and do his thing.
But yeah, Hot Frosty, I cannot recommend enough. If it's one of those that you know about, because I'm pretty sure it's been hard to avoid from social media at least lately, give it a chance.
Yeah, I enjoyed the hell out of it.
You'll know if you like it from like the first 5 to 10 minutes, I would say.
I don't even think you need to go that far. I in cases like this, I like to lean into Abraham Lincoln.
Okay.
It's the kind of thing you like if you like that kind of thing.
That's fair.
So Hot Frosty, really fun, and it was nice to dive into some brand new holiday fare for the year.
Yeah. Those were a lot of fun. Nutcrackers, Hot Frosty, those are our two recommendations, even before we get to our movie, which is the biggest recommendation this week, I would say.
Well, you think? I mean, what are you, new?
Might be.
You don't have that new smell.
Tell me about it.
So, shall we dive into 1990, what was it?
94.
1994's. We are hanging in the 90s a lot right now.
We have been, yeah.
We're going to have to.
Luckily, next week's movie is in the 2000s, so there's that. And so is the one after it.
Okay.
And then we go to the 80s after that.
Finally.
So we are taking a 90s break for 3 movies in a row.
3 whole movies. But this is, 1994 is The Ref. And this is one that if you are not familiar with it, you owe yourself to give it a watch.
Absolutely.
Hard to get a hold of right now, unfortunately. You can only really rent it, but it's worth $3.99 1,000%.
So, 1994 is The Ref, 1 hour and 37 minutes, rated R for language, just language. That's the only thing we have.
I hate when films have language. Why can't they just mime it?
Our director on the film is Ted Demme. He gets a start in 1987, directing the Push It Salt and Pepper music video.
Oh.
Yeah.
I mean, who doesn't remember that one?
Push it real good. Actually, going back to Linda Cardellini, she sings a karaoke version of it in Grandma's Boy.
It's all coming together.
He moves on in 1988 to Yo MTV Raps, then does a Kid and Play video, Rolling with Kid and Play, then directs Denis Leary's No Cure for Cancer in 1993.
Well, that explains quite a bit.
Then moves into Saturday Zoo in 93, Who's That Man in 93, Bruce Springsteen, The Streets of Philadelphia in 1994, the same year that he directs The Ref. Then he directs Homicide, Life on the Street in 94, Beautiful Girls in 96, Gun in 97, Denis Leary Lock and Load in 97, Monument Avenue in 98, Life in 99, and then his last film is Blow in 2001. He unfortunately leaves us January 13, 2002 at age 38 from an accidental cocaine-induced thermobatic heart attack. He was playing a celebrity basketball game and collapsed.
While on cocaine.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, I didn't even know that going into
I
this.
had no clue.
Yeah, and then when I saw his filmography, I was like, is he no longer with us? And then scrolled back up to the top and read. So yeah, it was actually pretty sad.
Jeez, well, way to get the holiday cheer going.
My
dude.
apologies. Sorry that I picked a movie that has a dead director.
Jeez, David.
Moving down to our writer, we have Marie Weiss, who has The Ref on her resume in 1994, screenplay and story. Then also has The Christmas List in 1997. Our other writer on the film is Richard Lavengraise. He gets his start in 89 doing the screenplay for Rude Awakening, The Fisher King in 1991, which he was Oscar nominated for.
Okay, yeah.
Then moves on to The Ref, which he gets screenplay credit for in 94, A Little Princess in 95, The Bridges of Madison County in 95, Unstrung Heroes, The Mirror Has Two Faces, The Horse Whisperer, Living Out Loud, which he also directs, Beloved in 98, Paris J'ai-Tami in 2006, which he's also a director on, Freedom Writers in 2007, which he's the director on, P.S. I Love You in 2007, which he's also the director on, Water for Elephants, Beautiful Creatures, he's also the director on, Behind the Candelabra, The Divide, The Last 5 Years, also directs that, Unbroken in 2014, and The Comedian in 2016 with Robert De Niro. Have you seen that movie?
Oh, yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah, I liked it.
It was a lot of fun.
I mean, it's The Intern.
It is,
but it'll do.
But it'll do. Moving down to our cinematographer, we have Adam Kimmel, who gets his start as an assistant camera on The Wanderers in 79, also the Brian De Palma film Dressed to Kill in 1980, Raging Bull in 1980, My Favorite Year in 82, Birdie in 84. It's not until 1987 that he becomes a director of photography on The Pogues, live in New York.
Okay.
Then he does LL Cool J's Going Back to Cali music video, U2's One video. Then in 1993, he also does the cinematography on Denis Leary, No Cure for Cancer.
Which is a really good special. I know we glossed over it earlier.
Yeah.
But that's a great special. I remember watching that
both No Cure for
times.
Cancer and Lock and Load I have on CD still, and both are still really funny.
I first saw it on television. Yeah.
Well, of course, No Cure for Cancer gave us Asshole, which is the #1 song that he's known for.
Well, yeah. I'm glad you prefaced that with what that meant. You're like, it gave us Asshole, and then that. Moving on.
So, Who's That Man in 93? The Ref in 94, he also shoots. Me and the Mob in 94. New Jersey Drive, Bed of Roses, Beautiful Girls, Denis Leary, Lock and Load, Monument Avenue. Almost Heroes in 98, Jesus' Son in 99, Beyond Suspicion, Capote, Bob Dylan When the Deal Goes Down, Lars and the Real Girl in 2007.
Okay, that one I wouldn't expect.
Never Let Me Go, 2010, Mark Felt, The Man Who Brought Down the White House in 2017.
I like that movie.
It was actually pretty good, yeah. And We Go Green in 2019, and Colin Quinn's Red State, Blue State in 2019 as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds like a New York guy mostly.
I would say so, yeah. Him and Demme worked together a lot until his passing, unfortunately.
Yeah.
IMDb synopsis for The Ref says a cat burglar is forced to take a bickering, dysfunctional family hostage on Christmas Eve.
I mean, I don't know. Sorry. I don't know if it could get much better than that, Double D.
My synopsis, when a robbery gets botched, a cynical cat burglar takes a bickering couple hostage on Christmas Eve, posing as their marriage counselor at a family gathering to evade the local police on his trail.
Well, first of all, you stole bickering from the original description.
Maybe I did, maybe I didn't.
Not that's a little uncool that you took a major descriptor from them.
How arguing, bickering? What other words can you use?
Dysfunctional.
Dysfunctional's in there. Bickering, dysfunctional family hostage. I only used bickering and added in the marriage counselor aspect of it.
No,
too.
you added more to it.
Yes. Do it.
No. It's not bad. It's not bad. It's just a little bit of a wash, but yours is definitely more all-inclusive.
Well, lucky for you, there's some great taglines here.
Oh, goodness.
First tagline, they might be his hostages, but what they're doing to this guy is criminal.
Okay, I kind of like that one.
My favorite is this one. He's taking them hostage. They're driving him nuts.
That's pretty solid, too.
Yeah. The Ref is currently available to rent on Prime, Fandango at home, and wherever you get your videos at. I will also say that if you are a physical media collector, the DVD is the only way to get it right now. It's never had a Blu-ray release, and no telling if it will right now.
Well, it's tied with Disney.
Yeah.
And one of these days they're either they're gonna have to open those floodgates for some boutique labels to license stuff.
Touchstone has a hell of a library, so I would think they would have to at some point.
Well, Touchstone was what saved Disney in the 90s when they were, the late 80s and early in the 90s when they were dying.
No, absolutely. Moving down to our cast, we have Denis Leary, who plays Gus. He gets his start in 91 with Strictly Business. He's also in Loaded Weapon 1 in 93, The Sandlot, previous episode of 93, Demolition Man, Judgment Night, The Ref, Operation Dumbo Drop, Two If by Sea, The Second Civil War, Suicide Kings, Wag the Dog, Monument Avenue, Small Soldiers, A Bug's Life, True Crime, Ice Age, Rescue Me, The Amazing Spider-Man, Draft Day. Leary's got a hell of a resume.
Have I ever told you my Denis Leary joke story?
Is it the one where you talked to the woman who owned a comedy club?
No, I was dating a girl whose mother was a stand-up comedian.
Okay.
In Jersey.
Yeah.
Have I told? I don't know if I told this
I don't
one
think
on
you
the
told
show.
it on here, but you told me.
Yeah. Well, so I was seeing this girl when I lived in North Jersey, and her mother was a stand-up in the 90s.
Yeah.
And she was telling a story about how one night she was at some little club in downtown.
Yeah.
And Denis Leary was on the show like for 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And he was new. People didn't really know him. And he got up on stage and everybody was just like, whoa. Because no one had, in her words, no one had ever seen anything quite like that before.
Yeah.
And I just immediately went, you guys have never seen Bill Hicks?
Yeah.
And she was like, oh, you're mean. That's funny, but you're mean. Yeah. That was her joke.
That's pretty good.
No hate, Dennis. I actually love Denis Leary
I do too.
a lot. And also the fact, I don't know if people know where the No Cure for Cancer special comes from. It comes from a joke.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing I miss about the 90s, aside from inflation, is jokes that would just spread across the country and no one really knew how. Like the Michael Jackson jokes, the O.J. Simpson jokes that would just permeate the world.
My God, yeah.
Well, the joke about Denis Leary was, why do more people know about Denis Leary than know about Bill Hicks? Because there's no cure for cancer.
Yeah.
That was the joke. So Denis Leary going on stage and doing a tour called No Cure for Cancer was his way of basically telling those people who were saying he was unoriginal, putting him down, basically telling them to kiss his ass.
Yeah.
And I respect that.
It's great.
So, and Denis Leary is one of the most memorable people when he's given a role that fits.
Yeah.
Whether it's The Ref, which I honestly think is a relatively modern classic, or even his role in Demolition Man, where they just kind of let him be him.
They absolutely do.
But it wasn't like they did it because they were lazy. They did it because he fit so well with his character.
Yeah.
Because they're living in, for those who've never seen Demolition Man, they're living in a world that's been nerfed in every way. Swearing is illegal. Sex is illegal. Alcohol's illegal.
Fast food's illegal.
Yeah. Meat is illegal.
Yeah.
And he lives underground with a bunch of people who refuse to live that way in this air quotes utopian society.
Yeah.
So when he starts giving his rants and raves about how he wants to smoke cigarettes and eat cheeseburgers,
run naked down the street singing I'm a little teapot.
I'm a little teapot. Yeah. When he gives those rants, that's what his stand-up act was, because his stand-up act was about, like, you know, in the song Asshole, you know, I want to eat a fatty cheeseburger in a non-biodegradable styrofoam carton.
Yep.
I want to smoke 5 cigarettes and a Cuban cigar while I do all, you know,
wipe my mouth with the American flag.
Yeah, that was his thing.
Yeah.
And he was well used. And in The Ref, he's phenomenally used, which makes a lot of sense now as I realize that clearly, and you'll get into how the movie came to be, but clearly the director was a choice from Leary's camp.
Yeah.
Because that was somebody who knew him and knew what he was capable of. So that's, I just want to, you know, hats off. Denis Leary, well, actually, I can't say he's underrated. Not after Rescue Me.
No, and his other show that made, I think it got 2 seasons. If not, it got 1, and it was very well liked. I can't remember if it got canceled or not, but Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll.
Sure.
It was a really good show,
But Rescue Me was not only huge, but like my mom liked Rescue Me, very, very popular with almost everybody.
Yeah, it's a great show.
I will say at the time, I feel he was underrated, but I think he's gotten his due in the last 15, 20 years.
I couldn't agree more.
Denis Leary, give us your anger.
So, moving on down the cast, we also have Judy Davis, who plays Caroline in the film. She gets her start in 1977 with High Rolling in a Hot Corvette, My Brilliant Career in 79, Hoodwink, Heat Wave, The Final Option in 82, Passage to India, Kangaroo, Georgia, Alice, Impromptu, Barton Fink in 91, On My Own, Naked Lunch, Husbands and Wives in 92, which I think is one of her most her biggest film, I think. Moving on that, we have The Ref in 94, The New Age, Blood and Wine, Absolute Power in 97, Deconstructing Harry, Dash and Lily, A Cooler Climate, The Man Who Sued God, Swimming Upstream, The Breakup, Marie Antoinette, The Starter Wife, Eye of the Storm, To Rome with Love, The Dressmaker, Feud, and most recently Ratched on Netflix in 2020.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, and most importantly, she was in 2 separate movies The Simpsons made fun of.
That is true as well.
Barton Fink and Naked Lunch. Do you remember those gags?
I remember those gags.
One of them was when the kids were all like, we're going to sneak into an R-rated movie. And they're all like, Barton Fink. So that's the movie they're sneaking into. And then when Bart has a fake ID, they go to see Naked Lunch.
Yeah.
And when they're walking out, he's like, I can think of at least 2 things wrong with that title. Anyway.
So good.
I have no memory or childhood of my own, only Simpsons references.
That's fair. You have a lot of Simpsons references. We bounce those sometimes.
You
do it way more than I do.
Well, I grew up in a time when if you wanted to, you could watch 3 episodes of The Simpsons every day after school.
Why did I think it was 5?
I don't know. It was 3, which is a lot.
Oh, no.
You could watch 2 on our normal Fox affiliate, and then we got Cincinnati's Fox affiliate, so you could watch one of them on there. And throughout time, sometimes they would overlap.
Yeah.
So I would switch to pick which one I like. Like, I'd be like, oh, I like that episode more. And I'd watch that one on WXIX.
Me with Family Guy in high school because TBS started showing it at that point, but then also Cartoon Network Adult Swim would show it at 11 or whatnot.
You're making me feel old. I remember buying the
Family
box
Guy
set after it had been canceled.
Canceled. The first time or the third time?
the original time it had been canceled.
Yeah.
And I remember watching the DVDs and going, wow, this show was really, really funny. And then being shocked when all of that attention brought it back.
Yeah.
So
it's
I
great.
feel very old. Thank you.
Sorry. Wrapping up our cast is Kevin Spacey, who plays Lloyd in the film. He gets a start in 88 in Working Girl, also does See No Evil, Hear No Evil in 89, probably a future episode because I just revisited that recently and I love that movie. Glengarry Glen Ross, The Ref, Swimming with Sharks, Usual Suspects, Outbreak, 7, A Time to Kill, LA Confidential, Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, The Negotiator, A Bug's Life, American Beauty, Pay It Forward, K-Pax, Shipping News, Life of David Gale, Superman Returns, The Man Who Stared at Goats, Horrible Bosses, House of Cards, Baby Driver in 2017 is probably his last one because, as we know, allegations and everything have come against him.
Yeah, lots happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. But one of my favorite movies of all time is Swimming with Sharks.
Swimming with Sharks is fantastic.
Yeah, no, and that's probably, in my opinion, some of his best work.
Yeah. Well, and like you and I've talked about, or I've said, I think a couple times on the show, separating art from the artist is what I do, and he left an incredible body of work.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm not to be that guy, but he hasn't been found guilty of anything.
No, I said allegations. Yeah.
So I mean, it's a delightful gray area for movie
Very gray
fans
area,
to never speak
Watch
of it
old
again.
movies.
Let us never speak of it again. Anyway, Jeffrey Jones.
Other names in the cast I do want to mention, just to show you how stacked the cast is. We also have Raymond J. Barry. We have Christine Baranski, Adam Lefevre, Bill Raymond. We have Scott Walker. I mean, there is a bunch of people in this movie.
Well,
and B.D. Wong.
I know. You would think they'd mostly be puppets, but they were able to get a full cast.
It's crazy.
No, it was
right?
cool to see B.D. Wong in there, especially because this was right before Oz started. And what you get is a ton of character actors from the East Coast because this was made on the East Coast.
Well, and I think this is this the year after Jurassic Park? Is Jurassic Park 93?
I think so.
Yeah, so the year after Jurassic Park then, too.
Oh, yeah, he was, yeah. Well, and you mentioned J.K. Simmons, right?
Oh, J.K. Simmons, yeah.
Yeah. He pops up in there, another Oz alumni, and also a character actor famous for being on the East Coast.
Yeah.
One thing when you're extra obsessed with movies, you notice by who fills the other roles where the film is shot.
Yeah.
Like, I guarantee you a major reason that J.K. Simmons was J. Jonah Jameson in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movies and then in later Spider-Man incarnations was because he was on the East Coast because they filmed it in New York.
Yeah.
Makes perfect sense. So you can definitely, like, there'll be movies I watch where I'll be like, oh, they must have shot, if not on the East Coast, they must have shot not in LA because, like, if they shoot in, say, a lot of those movies, 90s movies especially, might have been shot in North Carolina because they're like The Crow and stuff like that. You'll often see a lot of New York people because they're still cheaper to bring over compared to flying from LA
Makes
or flying
sense.
from wherever. Same goes if they shoot in Quebec.
Yeah.
Then there's a good chance you'll see a lot of New York actors because, again, much closer. So that's one of the things that watch it. Really, if you want a master class on who's a character actor in New York, just watch Oz. Just watch Oz.
100%.
Because it's nothing but them.
Yeah.
There's really nobody else.
Yeah. Was Judy Davis on Oz, or am I thinking of somebody else?
I don't think so.
Maybe she wasn't. Okay.
But well, there aren't a lot of female characters to go around
that's
on Oz.
why I was. Yeah, that's why I was
on
thinking.
account of the men's prison. I mean, there are some really good female
There's some great
characters on there,
storylines because of it too. Yeah.
but there's not many opportunities for women
Yeah.
in a men's prison show.
Well, because Edie Falco's on there, and I think that's pre-Sopranos, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh yeah, because the reason they wrote her character out was that
That's
she
right, she
was
got
committed
Carmela.
to filming Sopranos.
Yep, that's right.
So yeah, because her character like disappears with a note.
Yeah.
Yeah, they just flat out were like, look, Oz, we know you were our favorite child, but now this new baby is here and we love him a lot more.
Yeah.
Like when he coos, it's really cute. You're already getting BO.
Did they
You're
get
old.
the same amount of seasons, I think?
Oz had 7.
Okay, Sopranos had 6. Technically 7 because 6 is
Oh,
broken
wait,
into
no.
2 parts.
No, Oz had 6.
Oh, yeah, it broke it into 2 parts. So, yeah.
Season
same
4
thing.
was broken into 2 parts.
Yeah.
Yeah, stop talking about Oz or you'll never get to the movie.
So, what was your first time watching The Ref?
Oh, man. It was on Comedy Central a lot when I was in my mid-teens.
Yeah.
And they'd always make it a big deal. They'd always play lots of commercials and be like, Denis Leary in The Ref. And all I knew was that The Ref was not considered a huge hit.
Yeah.
And they were trying to, breathe life into it with an audience who liked Denis Leary and who, I mean, there were a lot of movies that Comedy Central was able to make movies people liked.
Oh, yeah.
They were able to kind of breathe new life into it because Comedy Central had that very specific audience
Oh, yeah.
that they could find for it. So The Ref was definitely one of those they play around the holidays a lot. And I always remember catching it here and there, catching half of it here, the beginning of it here or there, and laughing my ass off, thinking he was very, very funny. I was a very young fan of Denis Leary.
Yeah.
So then I guess it would be, I don't know, maybe in my early to mid 20s, I revisited it. And that was the first time I'd watched it all at once and uncut.
Yeah.
And it was on, it was either, I think.
Netflix?
No.
Okay.
No, that was later.
Yeah.
It was either on Stars or Prime.
I would almost bet Stars.
Early
Yeah.
in that era.
Yeah.
Like when Prime Video was very much more like Netflix than it is now.
Yeah, I would almost bet Stars almost.
And I flipped through and found it and I watched it right then and there because I had like a temporary membership or something.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was my revisiting. And I was floored by what a great film it was. I was floored by how hard I laughed the whole way through, how Christmassy it was. There is a varying degree of Christmasness in the movies we're covering for Christmas.
Yeah. And
this one is in like the 8 out of 10. The only way it would be more Christmas is if it was fully about Christmas.
I mean, it's literally, it's a happen one night on Christmas Eve.
Yeah. And the music cues involve Christmas music. There's tons of decor. There's Santa Clauses. Like I said, because on my Christmassy scale, like Long Kiss Goodnight would be like a 5. That's what we did last week. That would be like a 5 because Christmas setting is it's there.
It's there.
As to where like Lethal Weapon or Die Hard would probably be closer to a 3.
That's what I was thinking.
Because it's not focused on Christmas, but Christmas is always there and apparent.
Yeah.
And then there are a lot of movies that are like a 1 or a 2 where it's like, you see some lights, you're like, oh, hey, this is at Christmas.
Cobra.
Yeah, Cobra's a good example. So as to where like if you wanted a 10 out of 10, it would have to be something that's about Christmas.
Yeah, a Christmas story.
Like a Christmas story, or like to an extent Home Alone's probably a 9 out of 10.
Yeah.
Because it's basically about Christmas, but or a movie where Santa is a focal character or something like that. Those are going to be 10 out of 10.
It was
Christmas.
only like no shit a couple years ago that I realized Christmas Vacation, we never see Christmas Day. Because
we don't make
Christmas
it.
Eve.
Yeah. That's one of my favorite things about it.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's the other thing is like when it comes to adult comedies on Christmas, this one is very, very Christmas.
It absolutely is.
And very 90s in a comforting way.
Yeah.
For those like me who are or at death's door, we're just ancient already. Unlike you younger millennials, us elder millennials, we're cashing our Social Security checks.
Do you want me to make you feel older? Because I can tell you my first time watching.
Go on.
So I discovered The Ref circa 2004, 2005 via a Hollywood Video catalog.
I remember Hollywood Video.
It had to have been probably a little 10-page catalog that was just rent these movies at Hollywood Video, and it was still in the VHS days, so they were all tapes.
Wow.
And I remember going through them, and I remember seeing the cover of The Ref. And I liked Denis Leary at that point because I'd seen Small Soldiers. I was probably watching a little bit of Rescue Me with my parents at that point. So I knew who he was.
And how old were you again?
2004, I would have been 14.
Oh my God. Baby.
So, it was one of those situations where I was like, okay, I want to see this. And lo and behold, Comedy Central had it. One November, I was channel surfing and came across it and caught it right in the middle. And literally from that point on, that's how I kept watching that damn movie. It wasn't until a year later that I found a copy at the library, got to watch it, one sitting, completely uncut. Never saw the beginning until that time renting that tape.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, from that point on, it was one that I wanted, obviously, so I ended up finding a sealed copy at Goodwill, the same year that I rented it at the library, and had it on VHS for years, upgraded the DVD, and it's one that I will watch every single Christmas, most of the time with you.
Yeah, we've watched it at least 5 or 6 times.
A long time, yeah.
And every year it seemed like it would be somewhere else too.
Yeah.
One year, nowhere, we watched the DVD.
Yep.
Then one year it was on Netflix.
Yep.
For a while.
Yeah.
So we watched it on there, and that was the first time we'd seen it in HD.
Yeah, and then Vudu finally put it up, I think a year after that, and we both grabbed it, even though I think it was still full price, $14.99 at that point.
Yeah, I paid full price for my Vudu copy, but at least we have a accessible HD copy.
Yeah. What stick with me the most is the humor, the one-liners. I mean, the entire cast just keeps the film going in such a way with their delivery between each other, because you start seeing this really nice town, and then slowly but surely you get to see that oh no, there's some shitty people in this town too.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a little Connecticut town.
Yeah.
Where nothing ever happens.
Yeah.
But then this happens. And I'll dive into that a little bit more when we talk about one of my favorite characters in the film, which is the police chief.
Yes, Mr. Huff. So we open with a shot of the town of Baybrook, Connecticut. As we see, it's Christmas Eve. We see various people through the town. Shop owners are closing up. What would you say? It's probably about 5:30, 6 o'clock at this point.
Well, if they're in Connecticut, it could be as early as 4:30.
Yeah.
It gets dark really early when you're that far east.
Because by the time they get back home with Gus, he says it's 7:30 now.
Yeah, so it's probably about 5
Yeah,
o'clock
so-
or 4:30, something like that.
So it's early on Christmas Eve. The town's out and about. The choir's practicing. We're seeing the local law enforcement saying hi to people, and we're going through the town, just seeing it. And then we pan up to a window where we see a sign that says, Dr. Wong, marriage counselor.
I bet you, for the record,
Yeah.
in a small town like that, the marriage counselor is the wealthiest person. In a small Connecticut town in the 90s.
It could be.
So many marriages where they're like, well, getting divorced would be very expensive. I will pay anything to see a doctor right
now.
I bet he's very busy. He probably loves Christmas because, if he doesn't celebrate it, he's like, I'll just work through Christmas Eve to fix all these people's anger and rage about their ham not being finished.
Judging by his nice sweater, he definitely has money.
Oh, yeah. And his slicked back hair.
And his slick back hairs.
And just being B.D. Wong.
So
he just looks expensive.
We cut into his office as we meet Dr. Wong conducting a session between Caroline and Lloyd, and Caroline tells the doctor about a dream that she had recently. And Lloyd doesn't want to hear about the dream because it involves Carolyn being in a nice restaurant, and she served a platter with Lloyd's severed head on it and his penis stuck in his ear.
Yeah, except she says, I didn't order this, and the waiter leans in and goes, you must try it. It's a delicacy. But don't eat the penis. It's only garnish.
And Lloyd is not happy hearing this.
Well, Dr. Wong says, how do you feel about that, Lloyd? He's like, I wish she'd stop telling it at dinner parties.
And he goes on to say, Dr. Wong's like, well, how is the sex life? And Carolyn's like, it's decreased even more so. But even when it was up in its heyday, it still wasn't noteworthy. A couple kisses, a couple nipple twists.
Yeah,
that's why I had the affair.
It takes as long as making a cappuccino, I know, because I timed it once.
Yeah, timed it once. And even goes to say that that's why she ended up having an affair, which, was due to her unhappiness. But the affair didn't mean anything to her. And that's why, they want to move past it and try to fix the marriage. But Lloyd's convinced that she wants a divorce, or at least he wants a divorce.
Yeah, well, and he's like, you just say that so casually. I had an affair. Like, you're asking for a glass of water.
And this whole time, they're arguing and bickering. This is the first taste we get of Carolyn and Lloyd that's going to carry it through the rest of the movie. And Dr. Wong keeps repeating, he's not here to take sides. He's just here to listen. So then we cut to a car out in front of a mansion. We see a man sitting in the car smoking while the car is running. Inside, we meet Gus, played by Denis Leary, who is dressed in black, wearing a face mask, and he's trying to crack a safe. And he eventually gets it open. We hear the sound of a cat hiss, and then a spray happens as we find out. As we find out that the booby trap is cat piss.
Well,
of cat piss,
which may make no sense until. So as he's clearing out all of the stuff, I just love this sequence. He's clearing out all these jewels, diamonds. I mean, it's friggin' crazy how much stuff is in there.
Yeah.
There's just this one little ring box in the back. That is open, so you can see this giant diamond.
Yeah.
And as he reaches to grab it and pulls on the string, or pulls on it, it's connected to a string.
Yep.
The string makes the camera turn on the security camera. And when he goes to disable the camera, that triggers a trap door under his feet.
Yeah.
Which drops
him into the basement.
On a slide down, slams into the basement, where there is a very big Rottweiler.
A very big Rottweiler that we find out its name is Cannibal.
And now the cat piss makes a lot more sense.
It does indeed.
Talk about cruel. Like, I mean, come on. What are we tired of the old just shotgun on a window trick
God
now?
damn,
I mean,
dude.
geez. So now he's trying to figure out how to get away from this dog.
Throwing pool balls at it, which one that Cannibal catches and just smashes with his jowls.
It's perfection because the dog catches the billiard ball and crunches it into pieces.
Yeah.
And he's just like,
So then he holds up a diamond necklace, gets the dog's attention, throws it, hoping the dog will get off him. But the moment he moves off, he goes to a window. The dog jumps up, bites him.
Right on the ass.
So then we cut back to Dr. Wong's office where Lloyd tries to state that he's a happy person. You know, he's content. He sees nothing wrong with his life in particular.
I'm a very content person.
Carolyn sees right through it, calling him out and says, you know, we live in everything of the shadow of your mother. We live in a house which your mother owns. We have a business which your mother owns. And basically goes on to say that they all live under the shadow of his mom because she has money.
Well, and two things in this exchange. First of all, when she says, how can we live together and be together, and I'm miserable and you're content. And he says, luck. Which is amazing. But then the next one is, as she's explaining, like, you know, we have a beautiful home which your mother owns and a thriving business which your mother owns. He mentions that she gave them a loan.
Yes.
He's like, she helped us with our money. She's like, she gave us a loan at 18% interest.
18%. They're living in the house, charging them a loan for 18% interest.
Now, kids, as your lifestyle coach on this program, that is a piss poor APR.
It's a bad APR.
Even in the 90s, that was a bad APR. When you get a loan, not a credit card, but a loan, you're hoping to get under 10%. I know right now interest rates are really messed up, but you're hoping to get under 10%. Like when I got a loan, it was before my business was big enough. I got a personal loan because I couldn't get a small business loan to buy a camera. I got 8%. And I didn't have great credit, but 8% was, you know, my credit card company was going to offer me 18 or 19%. So I took it. When you buy a car, when I bought a car, my first car loan was 8.5% because I had horrible credit. But then when I refinanced a year later after I rebuilt it, I got it down to like 4.5%.
Yeah.
My point is some people just don't understand these things. So they don't know how
bad,
obscenely funny it is that a family member would give you a loan that's not even better than Discover Card would do. Like the only other film that has a interest rate joke that makes me laugh out loud is Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
When they get the loan to start their business, the interest rate is higher than most credit cards. It was like 23% or something.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, I'm almost 40 now. And interest jokes raise my interest.
I see what you did there.
I'm so sad.
So that leads Lloyd into basically talking about their son Jesse, who he calls a delinquent, and Carolyn tries to defend. But that's when Lloyd tells a story about how they asked him to get a job. He started a small business, which happened to be an escort service, and he gave the high school football team Mother Rose's phone number, the grandmother's phone number.
Their response, and I think her getting plowed by an 18-year-old linebacker is just what she needed.
And that's when Dr. Wong is like, please, can we be quiet? And they both go, fuck you!
Yeah, he has a bell he rings when they get too aggressive with each other, and he rings that bell, and they both just go, fuck you.
So back at the mansion, Gus has cleaned, or has fallen in by this point. He's been bitten by the dog, and we also see that Murray, his partner, has left. The car is gone. The cops have surrounded it by this point, and we see there's a pile of cigarette butts.
A big fat pile of cigarette butts.
So that is when, down the road a bit, Carolyn and Lloyd have ended their session. They are parked at a local convenience store, still bickering, and that's because Carolyn, again, brings up the divorce, and that's when Lloyd's like, we're not getting a divorce, we're going to work this out. And she's like, are you coming in? And he's like, no, I think I'm going to stay out here. There are other things happening in the life besides us, Carolyn.
Because he's listening to the radio. He's listening to the news.
Yeah. And that's when she gets out of the car and he goes, Carolyn, if the day that you see something through to the very end is the day I'll stick my own dick in my ear.
Yeah. Referring to their divorce. Like, because she wants a divorce and he doesn't want to give her one.
Yeah. So we see Carolyn go into the store, and that's when behind Lloyd, we see Gus walking into the store as well.
Uh-oh, I wonder if they'll meet up.
They might just meet up. So we cut into the store, and Carolyn's kind of just having a little bit of a crisis while she shops. Gus immediately sets his sights on her and kind of goes to the back of the store, eventually sneaking up on her, putting a gun in her back, and telling her not to move. That's when we see Gus and Carolyn go out to rejoin Lloyd in the car, and that's when he points the gun in Lloyd's face and tells him to drive. And of course, Lloyd is like, what's going on? Everything okay? And yeah, this is Gus means business.
Two things about this sequence.
Yes, sir.
Number one, there is nothing more truthful to the holiday experience than her walking up to an aisle to grab like paper towels and maybe one more thing and just taking a second, like leaning her head on the shelf, like just totally exasperated by all of this. Because they just had this horrible. Their marriage is terrible. They're arguing like crazy. She says she wants a divorce. Now they have to host Christmas Eve dinner.
Yes, they do.
So now he kind of kidnaps her. Yeah. Takes her hostage. And when they get in the car, this is something I thought was really worth pointing out. Lloyd?
He's concerned.
Lloyd is like, are you okay?
Yeah.
Which I love that because that's a foreshadow that they don't entirely hate each other.
Yeah.
But their baggage is so vast.
Yeah.
They have so much in the way of them caring for each other. It's sad.
It is sad.
Yeah.
So we cut across town to the local station where we meet Lieutenant Huff, who is being hassled by the rich locals of Baybrook, who are like, why aren't you putting more men out there? And he's like, your men are not trained. Like, we get the idea that Huff has just took this position, like, maybe a year ago?
Yeah, I when I watched this movie the first few times, I always thought he was just like being outrageously funny and ridiculous. But as I've watched it more, I've realized why he's so angry.
Yeah.
Because when they say, like, why aren't your men doing more stuff? He says, because these men aren't trained to do this. Yeah. They're like, well, they're police, aren't they? He's like, they have no experience. Nothing happens in this town. And he basically says, like, you guys only care if you only need us if a kid plays a prank on you or one of your, I won't say exactly what he says, but one of your dogs humps the other without permission.
And that's what you call your judges and your lawyer friends.
Yeah.
So could call them now.
Yeah, he's like, everything else you call your judge friends or your district attorney friends. So why don't you call them now?
Yeah.
And then they're like, well, you don't have to be the chief of police. Like, I could the mayor's an old golf buddy of mine. And his response is just, get out.
Get out.
Now, when I used to watch this, I used to think that the joke was just the absurdity of how aggressive he is. But now, as I've watched it a bunch of times, what he's mad about is that he's probably spent his entire career trying to get some real cops.
Yeah.
In that city.
Into Baybrook, yeah.
And every time they're like, no, hire my friend's son's kid. No, hire my kid. No, hire my cousin's son. So now he's just sitting there like, you people.
You did this.
You have to know, right? That we don't have any police officers.
Yeah.
And that I find really funny, but I've gained a lot of empathy for his character. Because now when I look at him, I'm like, he's not being a jerk to be a jerk.
No.
He's just like, what do you want? Like, he's just done already.
Yeah.
Like, he was probably done a long time ago, which we didn't see.
No.
And I love that whole thing.
His arc is pretty great.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
So we cut back to Carolyn, Lloyd, and Gus in the car, and Gus is listening to the radio as Lloyd drives, and we find out there's going to be a curfew now at 10 p.m., that they may or may not be doing house-to-house searches, and also that there may be a reward because Willard might be putting some money up. Willard, who owns the mansion.
Yeah, and roadblocks.
And roadblocks.
And the reward's $100,000.
Yes. So that's when Gus tells him to turn off the radio, and he's trying to figure out what he wants to do, and that's when he's like, you know what? Let's go to your house. And Lloyd's like, oh, well, we can drop you off somewhere. You know, we have people coming over. We can't. He's like, no, take me to your fucking house.
Yeah.
So he orders them to take them to the house, and that is when Carolyn and Lloyd get into it again, and that's when Gus is like, hey, stop screaming. I have a gun. Like,
Gun. Yeah. Gun right here. Gun.
And that's when they are arguing more and more, and that's when Carolyn's like, if you knew I wasn't a single woman, you wouldn't have abducted me, right? And he's like, honestly, no.
Yeah, I wouldn't have abducted you if I known you were a couple. No.
And she even says something along the lines of like, I can vouch for Lloyd, he's no hero, and that pisses Lloyd off. So they're arguing more and more. Back at the mansion, Huff arrives to find out that they have found the face mask, and actually one of the deputies, which is Phil, he's like, it's got an odor to it, and Huff takes a smell, and he's like, it's cat piss, and he's like, oh, that's great. Phil thought it was like semen. He's like, Phil needs to get that checked out.
Phil needs a therapist.
Yeah, Phil needs a therapist. So that's when Lieutenant Huff gets a call of the radio. He finds out that they have a video of the suspect, but also that the state police are in custody of it because they're going to be taking over the investigation, and he needs to clear his men out there, leave a couple for when the Stadies arrive.
Which, I mean, is what would make sense.
Yeah. So we cut back over to a military academy now as we meet Jesse Cheshire, who is in his dorm, but he's in his private little photo lab developing pictures.
He has a dark room.
Yeah,
he's developing film.
And we get a shot of the film as we see a man with what I can only assume are two sex workers. I don't know what you would assume.
Hose?
Christ.
Prostitutes?
Commander Siskel, played by J.K. Simmons, who also shows up at Jesse's door knocking, and that's when Jesse opens the door wishing him a Merry Christmas, and also is like, I can't give it to you out here, and that's when he's like, oh, well, I can go ahead and, send some pictures to your wife. I just did a roll. They look great. And he calls him a demon seed, hands over the money, wishes him his best, and that's when he shuts the door. So we get the idea that Jesse has just blackmailed his commander at the academy.
No, we get the idea that Jesse has been blackmailing.
Yeah.
It's ongoing, young Denoyer.
Yeah. So meanwhile, Lloyd and Carolyn arrive at the house. Oh, wait, I missed the thing. So when they're arguing for the first time.
Yeah, one of my favorite moments.
Yeah.
They argue about Lloyd just powers through a stop sign and didn't see it, and she was trying to tell him, and so was Gus. So then when he's like, there was no stop sign, and she's like, there was no stop sign. He just goes, great.
I hijacked
my fucking parents. Which is such a great moment because, for real, if you've ever had to deal with somebody who, or had to deal with a couple who are awful.
Yeah.
The oxygen just leaves the room when they fight. So the idea of being a armed gunman taking them hostage and they can't help themselves. It's really funny because that's the same concept as like if they're at a party together.
Yeah.
And they can't help themselves. They're going to argue even though everyone's here, everyone's listening. Like, couldn't you just save this till you get home? It's like, no, they can't help themselves. Well, even a guy said there's like, I will shoot you if you don't do what I say. And they're like, yeah, but he's wrong. It's so good. And it's why, if you haven't picked up yet, that's why it's called The Ref.
Yeah.
Because he ends up becoming basically a referee for this dysfunctional family.
Exactly.
Phenomenal title. Phenomenal usage.
So meanwhile, the three arrive at the house. Lloyd turns off the alarm, and that's when we also hear that Jesse's leaving a message saying he's going to be late. And Gus is noticing the house. He's like, man, this is a nice house. What do you guys do? This doesn't come cheap. And that's when Lloyd's like, oh, well, I run an antique store in town. And Carolyn interjects that it's his mother's shop. And that's when they start to argue again. Then Gus makes a new rule that only people with guns can yell. Why? Guns. But you two can't yell. Why? No guns.
No guns.
Simple little equation.
Simple equation.
So he also asked Lloyd if they have any rope, and that's when Lloyd is like, well, why do you need some rope? And he's like, hey, did I ask any questions? Did I ask why? Like, do you have any rope? No, we don't have any rope. And Carolyn's like, we have bungee cords.
The ouchless.
So that's when he asks to see where the bungee cords are, and he also notices that the dinner table is set, and he finds out that they have guests arriving at 9 p.m. And that's when we cut to a diner for
This
your
scene
favorite
pisses
scene.
me off so much. Like, to the depth of my spirit, this scene makes me angry.
Yeah.
Tell them what's happening.
So we cut to a diner where we meet Lloyd's brother Gary with his wife Connie, their kids John and Mary, plus we get to meet Mother Rose.
Ah, Mother Rose.
And they're getting dinner at the diner because that's when Mary asked, I thought we were going to eat at Uncle Lloyd's house, and that's when Connie is like, God knows what your Aunt Carolyn's making, blah, 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 blah. So they're eating to avoid eating Carolyn's food.
They're eating before they go to dinner.
Yeah.
The audacity, like that is such a, like, just stop wasting everyone's time.
Yeah.
If you hate it so much, just don't go. I know, for some reason, this one really presses my buttons.
So back at the house, Gus asks, what's the worst dive bar in town? At this point, we see that Lloyd and Carolyn are tied to shares of bungee cords. And he's like, what's the worst dive bar in town? Both of them say a different one and then argue about how do they know that. And that's when Gus goes to call the Mackerel Lounge, searching for Murray.
Yes, and of course Murray is there.
Murray is there, and that's when he's like, is there a guy named Murray there? The bartender calls to Murray. He's like, I don't think he's here, pal. And he's like, why don't you try if there's a waste of fucking life named Murray there? So the bartender laughs.
says it, yeah.
Yeah. He's a waste of fucking life named Murray here. And Murray goes, Gussie.
Gussie.
And so takes the phone, and that's when Gus just lays into him for leaving the scene. If the cop showed up, he was supposed to act like a drunk vagrant, and that's, what the plan was. And that's when he's like, I got scared. I had to leave. And he's like, okay, well, then the new plan is I need you to go to the local harbor, which is Windsor Harbor, and steal a boat. And he's like, what the hell do I know about boats? Like, I'm a car thief. Like, what do I know about boats? And he's like, learn. It's 8:30 now. Curfew starts at 10. That should give you plenty of time. And also, if you don't pull this off, you know what men like you in prison make? Wet nurses.
Wet nurses.
So he also, Murray asks, is there a chance that he can get to the loot? And that's when he's like, no, Murray, figure this out. So he hangs up with them, and Gus goes to the fridge, takes out a bottle of wine, takes a long gulp from it before asking Carolyn and Lloyd, do either of them smoke? And that's when Lloyd's like, I don't smoke. Carolyn just quit.
Yeah.
And Gus sees through this immediately, walking up to Carolyn and going, just quit, huh? Where are they?
Where'd you hide them?
And she's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And he's like, where'd you hide them, Carolyn? So then that's what she says. They're behind the chessboard. He goes to the chessboard, takes them out, and just starts like smelling them.
Yeah.
Naturally, Lloyd and Carolyn start bickering again. So Gus just walks over, pushes both of their chairs to the ground.
Well, because she starts this BS of like, well, I had them because I never said I quit. I said I quit smoking cigarettes, but I'll puff a couple of times and not inhale just to like whatever and blah, blah, blah. So they're fighting. And I love that he pushes them over and he goes, Caroline, did you say
you quit?
Did you say you quit? Yes. Then you're a liar.
Capital L, small I, small A, small R, liar. Lloyd's laughing at this point, and that's when he's like, you saw the stop sign, didn't you, Lloyd? And that's when he points the gun in his face, like brushing his nose with it. You saw the stop sign, didn't you? And Lloyd admits he does, and he's like, you're both liars. And that's when, as he's walking away, then they're on the floor, Lloyd goes, what's that smell? And he goes, shut up. And that's when Carolyn's like, do you know you're bleeding? And he's like, oh yeah, a dog bit me. And he's like, Cannibal bit you? The dog's name is Cannibal. So they offer him Band-Aids. Carolyn even says they have the ouchless kind.
Ouchless.
And that's when Gus walks away and Lloyd starts giving her shit. He's like, you want to have sex with him? And she's like, I'm frightened. This is a reaction. Didn't they teach you that before your alien lords dropped you off here?
No, their fighting is exquisite.
And we forgot to also add that Gus sprays them with the sink while they're arguing while he's on the phone with Murray. Because he's like, hold on for a second.
Yeah.
He just sprays both of them.
He just turns the sink on and uses the spray head and just douses them both a little bit.
So suddenly the doorbell sounds. We see that George, who is now dressed as Santa Claus, is bringing around his wife's fruitcake as Carolyn goes to answer the door. And we get the idea that Carolyn really doesn't like the fruitcake because she's like, I bet you thought that Margaret left her off her fruitcake list. Well, she would never do that.
No, she'd never do that. Now, David.
Yes.
Are you a fruitcake kind of person?
It just depends. I've had good fruitcake and bad fruitcake.
Okay.
It was about 5 years ago I actually got into it because it had always been a joke.
Have you? Well, of course.
Yeah.
Have you? So was the bad fruitcake store-bought?
Store-bought.
What was the good fruitcake?
Good fruitcake is one that my friend Sue makes, which is entirely from scratch. It was like the first fruitcake I ever had.
Okay.
And it's phenomenal.
And before we get back to the film, after Thanksgiving,
yes,
is there any family members you want to throw under the bus for cooking poorly that you left out from Thanksgiving?
No, we're good. We're good here.
Any dishes or side dishes that are always turning out badly?
I am
you need
good.
To just like, it's okay. We're deep into the show. No one's going to hear this except the people who actually want to hear what we think about the ref.
No
one who
good.
loves us is still listening.
We are good.
This is just you sons of bitches.
Yes. No.
All right.
Thanksgiving
all right.
was delicious, actually.
Did I even talk about my cousin?
I don't think you did. Maybe you did, but I can't remember.
It's all right. Just my family Thanksgiving got canceled because my cousin who was cooking everything had to go to the emergency room.
Yeah.
He's okay. But so I ended up spending most of Thanksgiving at the Cigar Lounge.
Yes, you did.
Which was actually
You got an awesome plate from what I saw, sir.
Oh my gosh.
The spread at the lounge.
I went in there and smoked a cigar, and then I asked Gonzo, do you mind if I take a plate home? And he was like, please. Do you have any idea how much turkey I made? Yeah, no, it was that's just a side note. Anyway, back to your bullshit.
So that's when George, as Santa, also brings up, hey, has that son of yours around? I'm still waiting on our chess rematch. Oh, also, if he's seen it, we're still missing the baby Jesus from the nativity scene a couple years ago, and then just saunters
Well, he
off.
says, like, if he returns, no, I don't want to ask any questions.
Yeah.
I'm not here to whatever. We just want it
We
back.
just want it back. And of course, Carolyn's like, he blames Jesse for every year. He doesn't even play chess anymore. Meanwhile, Gus is getting to the fruitcake, does not like it, spits it out.
Yeah.
So that's when he's like, where are those Band-Aids at? So they start going up the steps, and that's when he notices a real Chagall on the wall. And he's like,
Chagall on the wall.
Chagall on the wall. And he's like, this is nice. And she's like, oh, yeah, you want it? Like, I can't stand that painting. Every time I walk past it, I think of Lloyd's mother. And that's when he's just like, this is a real one, right? Like, that really pisses me off that you guys have this and you don't appreciate it.
Yeah, he's like, I can't believe this hanging on somebody's wall and they don't even appreciate it.
Probably because you never worked a day in your life. And that's when she's like, that's not true. We had a restaurant. It was Italian. It went wrong. And that's when Gus is like, wait, are we girlfriends? Like,
are we girlfriends?
So they continue up the steps.
Yeah. No, I love that sequence because you kind of get a sense that, like, it's not that they're rich.
Yeah.
It's that they have a nice home and nice things and they don't give a shit.
No.
That's what bothers him.
Yeah.
Because he's a criminal. He kind of lives. We find out what his life is like a little bit later. And to me, the older I get, the sadder it is when he explains like how he lives.
Yeah.
It's very sad.
So we cut to outside where we see George walking away from the house. We see that Jesse has picked up a limo and he is in the limo watching George walk away. And that's when he asked the limo driver, how about I give you another 50 to go around the block? And he's like, hey kid, I want to get home. It's my family. And he's like, oh, yeah, that's when he saw throwing the 50. And he's like, all right, it's your money. So Jesse does not want to go home.
No. And why wouldn't he want to?
Yeah.
I mean, this dream factory of a home.
Yeah. So meanwhile, across town, George is now at another local Christmas party as Santa, and the kids are excited. The family's excited, and that's when they're like, do you think Santa might want something to eat? And he's like, oh, Santa would love something. Kids run up giving him cookies and milk. Like a lot of Oreos in the hand. He's like, all right, kids, enough with the cookies.
Enough with the cookies.
But don't worry, we'll check back in with George later.
Oh, yeah, plenty.
So we now see that Gus has moved Carolyn and Lloyd upstairs. He's tied them together facing each other on the bed. They're still doing bickering. And they're also trying to get loose. Carolyn's trying to figure out how to get the bungee cord loose. And that's meanwhile, Gus is hearing about Jesse's delinquent side, goes through the room and finds in a trunk the baby Jesus.
Well, and this is one of the things I love is that, first of all, when they're tied together, they also start to find a moment of levity together, which is really sweet, where they're kind of commenting on the fact that they are rubbing against each other, trying to, do whatever.
Well, Lloyd accuses her of sleeping with him while they were gone. Wanting to gone.
Yeah, you want to sleep with him, don't you?
Yeah.
But when Gus walks into this kid's room, it's just so great because he looks around the room and immediately knows where bad things are hidden.
Yeah.
Because he's like, well, if this kid's a delinquent, I'm a delinquent.
Mm-hmm.
I know what, I know where it'll be. Finds the baby Jesus. He's like, but it's also because the kid's mom is in denial.
Yeah.
And maybe if they paid more attention, they'd know he was getting into this kind of trouble.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really telling moment too, because one thing we start to realize very quickly about Gus is that Gus is a sympathetic person.
He is.
Not just a sympathetic character, as in you feel bad for him, but I mean, he's a sympathetic person. He looks at their situation. He's like, what the fuck is wrong with you people?
Yeah.
Like, why are you so angry? Why are you so sad? Like, if you ever talk about it, Jesus, and that's because that whole sequence just, did you say you'd quit? Did you see the stop sign? It's like they're so overwhelmed with their baggage. The only way you can get them to actually speak honestly to each other and admit they're wrong is with a gun in their face.
Yep.
So good.
So good.
So good.
And by this point, Gus is also kind of even more coming undone because George told them, that Willard called these radio stations, said he's going to offer $100,000 to anybody that turns him in. So now Gus doesn't know if he can trust anybody either.
Well, he shouldn't trust anybody anyway.
To begin with, yeah.
But now, I mean, just like the tagline of the hit film The Room, can anyone really trust anybody?
So meanwhile, Carolyn's trying to wiggle out of the binds, and she's like, Lloyd, move your hand. And he's like, that's not my hand. And she's like, well, what is that? And he's like, it's nothing. And she's like, doesn't feel like nothing. And he's like, it's the friction, exposing that Lloyd has an erection while they're tied together.
Wow, David, look at David with the clinical terminology.
Correction, erection?
Yeah, I thought you would say he has sporting a bit of wood.
He has a bona.
A bona.
A bona.
Yeah, the bishop is awake and ready for mass.
So he states it's just the friction. Gus coming in comments, Lloyd, you animal. And he also questions, didn't you leave yet? And Gus like, well, did you hear the phone ring? And that's when they remind him that, he can't keep them tied up all night. They have guests coming over, Jesse's coming over, and that's when Gus is like, well, I guess we're just going to have to make do with what we got, and starts untying them to use some of the bungee cords for Jesse when he arrives.
Yeah, because they explain they have nothing else to tie him up.
Yeah. So meanwhile, Gary and the family are being stopped at a police checkpoint, and that's when Mother Rose is like, I can't believe they're doing this to people on Christmas Eve, and that's when Connie is just like, well, there's a criminal out, and they got to catch him, and Mary's like, maybe in the true spirit of Christmas, they'll catch him and let him go. And Connie's like, who would do that? I don't know, Republicans?
Which is a funny throwaway line, but it's also a really good example that Mary is the more outspoken child.
Yeah.
And the one who's willing to say something that's going to piss somebody in the family off.
Yeah.
Because then that becomes more apparent when we get to the delightful
dinner sequence. So back at the house, Gus reties Carolyn and Lloyd to their bedpost now, chastising Lloyd for his simple-mindedness because basically, what does he say at this point? This is where Lloyd is basically kind of calling Gus out for his act that he can't get away. Like, you're a criminal, you're going to get caught. He's like, fuck you, Lloyd, I work for a living.
Yeah. He's like, not all of us can just open a restaurant and have it close. And he's just... You told him about the restaurant?
Even bringing up his rich mother, and that's when Lloyd quickly shut them up, and he's like, well, I would love to be carefree and live like you do and take classes, but somebody has to pick up the bill. So just excuse the shit out of me. So good.
No, it's the way everything is woven together.
Yeah.
I love when people are pulled into shit that has nothing to do with them, but the level of absurdity of this scenario makes it exquisitely funny.
Yeah. So the discussion is cut short as we hear Jesse arrive downstairs. Gus tells him to be quiet as we see Jesse go into his room, hiding a briefcase full of money under the floorboards as he takes the floorboard up and just puts the stacks right under. Before going into their room, he quickly sees his parents tied up, and that's when Gus tells him to put his hands behind his back. Jesse realizes who he is, and he's like, what are you doing? Like, this isn't your MO. You do, like, robbery. Hostages, it's a no-win situation.
The kid is so versed in being a criminal. It's so good.
Like, Gus is like, you too. Like, what this family needs? A mute. And I'm going to remind everybody right now, I have a gun.
Gun.
So that's when Gus takes notice that the apple does not fall far from the tree. He reminds him he has a gun, and then they try to explain once again they have company coming over, and he's like, well, dinner's canceled. And like, well, it can't be canceled. They're on their way here. And that's when he's like, as soon as I get my call, I'll leave. And that's when Jesse goes, it smells like piss.
Just get in the other room. Yeah. I love how he becomes sensitive.
Yeah.
About the fact that he smells like cat pee.
Yeah. So at the station, the officers are sitting around watching a cable broadcast of It's a Wonderful Life. And one of them's like, I've never seen this before. And the guy's like, what, don't you live in America? And he's like, well, it's always on, but, busy with the holidays and whatnot.
Cooking and the kids.
And so that's when Lieutenant Huff comes in and he's like, what I'm about to show you does not leave this room. Give it a chance. Look at this, plays the tape, and it's the video of the robbery. It's Gus falling down the chute, and that's when they realize it's Willard's place. Suddenly, he's like, he gets a call, and he's like, hey, I want you to watch this, but, wait till I get back, and we'll look at this again. So the guys being impatient are just like, should we watch it again?
Watch a little bit more.
Yeah,
but we could just watch a little bit more of the movie.
And not knowing how the remote works, one of them accidentally hits record, and then they change the station, and we'll get back to that in just a second.
Oh, yes.
So, meanwhile, Murray arrives at Windsor Harbor. He quickly finds a boat, and he starts stepping on it, and a woman comes out, and she's like, who are you? What are you doing? And he's like, I'm Murray. And she's like, what do you want? We cut away from them. Back at the house, Lloyd questions Jesse on how did he get home while Carolyn tries to talk to him, but Lloyd interrupts, and that's when Jesse makes up a lie that he rode with a friend. Lloyd's like, what friend? And he's like, fine, I took a limo. How did you afford a limo? Meanwhile, all this is happening. Gus is in the bathroom turning the water on, putting his fingers in his ears, going, la, 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 la.
just trying to escape these people for 5 seconds.
So then they all start arguing again. Gus comes out of the room, and he's like, I thought you all were family. Like, how can you talk to each other like this?
Yeah.
So he asks, what's the quickest way to the dock? And that causes another argument. And Jesse's like, there's a path through the woods. They don't agree with that. And that's when they start arguing again. Jesse looks at Gus and goes, you're never getting out of here. You know that, right? So we cut back to the station as Huff goes back out and he's like, okay, we don't have much time because he knows the state police are coming for this tape, which, they never explain how he got it. So he's like, we don't have much time. Remember any characteristics that you can. He goes to push play and it's a scene from It's a Wonderful Life. And he's like, well, that can't be right. Rewinds it again. The scene plays and that's when they realize they taped over the tape. Right as a guy arrives and he's like, Mr. Huff, I hear you have some evidence for the state police.
Remember what I said about he'd been angry for a long time about the police?
Yeah.
There you go.
So Gus paces back at the house, twirling a doll around by the hair, smoking a cigarette, and that's when Lloyd's like, excuse me, could you be careful with those dolls? Oh, I'm sorry, and just takes the head and rips
the head right off and throws it
across the room. So a TV news report cuts in, and Willard has now raised the reward from $100,000 to $200,000. Gus smokes a cigarette, adding he's in hell. Connecticut's the fifth circle of hell. Suddenly the smoke alarm starts going off. It's right above him, but he can't just jump up and get it, so he goes to get a chair. Goes right through the chair, stands on the bed, falls off the bed. When he falls off the bed, though, the gun gets loose. Jesse has gotten loose at this point. He gets the gun and he's pointing it on Gus, and that's when Carolyn and Lloyd are like, Jesse, be careful, like, stop what you're doing. And Gus is like, shut up. He's like, are you going to shoot me, kid? And he's like, I'll shoot you. And he's like, I don't think you will. Gets the upper hand, gets it away from Jesse, then shoots the smoke detector, killing it.
Yes. And that's another sign, that the parents clearly care about Jesse a whole lot, because when he has the gun, their first thought is just give him back the gun.
Yeah.
Don't try to be the guy who shoots him.
Yeah.
You don't.
So Gus walks over with the phone to Carolyn, and that's when it's Connie, who they've stopped at the convenience store that they stopped at when Gus kidnapped them, and they're getting more snacks. And that's when she's we got caught in traffic, but we'll be there soon. I hope that dinner's hot. Can't wait. So they're going to be there in 20 minutes, and that is when we see Siskel is also at the military academy. He's listening to Blue Christmas. The phone rings. It's his wife, and she's like, honey, where are you? Your family's here. The kids are asking about you, and he's looking at the negatives of the photos.
Yeah, he's reflecting on everything.
Yeah, he says he's got something to do, and then he'll be home. So back at the house, Gus has now moved Jesse into a closet, tied him to a chair, and that's when, Jesse's like, hey, man, I've got some money. I know a quick way to the docks, and that's when Gus is like, kid, shut up. Like, you don't know what you're talking about. And do you want to take it from here?
I mean, you're talking about when he wants to run away with Gus?
Yeah.
Oh, he basically explains that his life is stealing a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
Usually he runs off to Jamaica, fences the stuff for about half what it's actually worth.
Yep.
Hangs out with a buddy, drinks Mai Tais, then the money runs out, comes home, does it all over again. But this time is supposed to, but even he's cynical about it. He's like, but this time is the one last score.
Big score.
I'm supposed to stop doing it.
Yeah.
But his life is just, it's so sad. And then he even says, it may sound, it sounds cool to a teenager.
Yeah, when you're 15, but it's pretty sad.
When you're 35 years old, you have no house, no wife, no kids, nobody who gives a shit whether you live or die.
And then I go on, go see kids like you going on Oprah and just bitching about when you have everything available to you.
Yeah.
And he's like, welcome to the real world where things don't go your fucking way.
Yeah.
Such a good line.
Well, and then he says, but everything does go your way.
Yeah.
And he's just like,
you have a gun.
Yeah. And then he literally says, I thought you were smart.
Yeah.
I guess I was wrong.
So he gags him, closing him up into the closet. And that's when he goes out to Carolyn and Lloyd. And he says, all right, house rules, no phone, no TV, no fighting. If you fight, I'll take your son with me. And he's like, now tell me about this doctor, as he's putting on a tie. So that's when we see that he is going to pose as the marriage counselor.
Yes, he will be Dr. Wong.
So back at the station, Huff is told by the Bayview guy, Bob, and he's like, hey, the state police are your men are to report to me, blah, blah, blah. Oh, and by the way, your Christmas present came in. I talked to my friend the mayor, and he says you're to be out of here the day after Christmas. Isn't that a lovely Noel?
Oh, this is so brutal.
And that's when Huff says, Bob, I nailed your wife. last year you were out of town, and I nailed her after the Bayview Citizens meeting. 3 times, Bob. We went 3 times. She said you never go 3 times, Bob. And that's Huff's exit to the movie.
Yeah, that's it. He just says that to him. It's so good. I can't imagine how the writer came up with that.
Yeah.
But it's perfection.
It's so good. So back at the house, deputies Phil and Steve arrive knocking on the door because they want to see Gary, their old high school friends, and that's when Lloyd answers the door, and they're like, is Gary here? And he's like, oh, not here. Meanwhile, Gus and Carolyn are hiding in the closet. Gus goes to lean on the rack, and the whole rod gives out, so he falls. And the guys think it's Carolyn, so they're like, we'd love to say hello. We'd love to come in, and that's when Lloyd invites them in. Walks him to the kitchen, but then he gets pulled into the closet by Gus, and he's like, what the hell did you bring him in for? And he's like, well, they heard a sound. What was I supposed to do? And he's like, she could have been upstairs taking a shower, wrapping presents. And he's like, what is this, a liar's convention?
Yeah, what is this, a liar's convention? I did the best I could. And he even mentions, it'd be weird if I didn't let them in because I've known them since high school.
Yeah, he's like, it would have been more suspicious to do that. So upstairs in the closet, we see Jesse is getting to work trying to get free of his binds. Downstairs, the deputies using the phone have called his wife, and he's like, I'm not going to pick up wine. Your brother can suck on grapes. All right, I'll pick up the milk and the donuts. And that's when he's like, well, hang on, they're getting another call. And we see that it's Murray, and he's like, Gussie, and he's like, no, this is Deputy such and such. Who is this? And he's like, ah!
And he goes, ah, and just hangs up. Ah, click.
So that's when he's like, it hung up, and he's like, oh, must have been a wrong number. Calls back. Carolyn takes it, and she fakes that it's somebody that she knows. And that's when he's like, who gives a rat's ass how I feel? Where's Gussie?
Yeah. So then when Gus goes to answer the phone, before he can get to it,
she set the phone out.
Yeah, he hears the cops talking about stuff, so he hangs up again, thinking that the cops are onto them.
Yeah, so that's when he goes to plug the phone back in, and he's like, Murray, and Murray hangs up again, and he's like, he hung up, and he's like, Carolyn's like, well, he sounded distressed, and he's like, he should be. He's gonna die a horrible fucking death.
I love that line.
And right as he finishes saying that, we hear Connie go, Carolyn, from the bottom of the steps, and that's when Carolyn says, speak of the devil.
Literally.
So
this woman, guys.
Oh man,
this woman.
So the 3 join Gary and Connie downstairs with their family and Mother Rose. That's when Phil and his deputy, call out to Gary, and that's when they see them. That's when Gus and Lloyd go down to meet Mother Rose, and that's when she's like, I want to go upstairs and drop my bags. Well, I'll get them. Well, I want to take my shoes off. Oh, well, go barefoot. A Bohemian Christmas. I can be with that.
He's just trying so hard to keep her from going upstairs.
Yeah, and she's like, why do you always get weird around family gatherings? He's like, it's actually Carolyn. She's nervous about the dinner. Why don't you go into the kitchen? See if she needs any help. Give her some input. And she's like,
give her some pointers, some advice.
All right, and walks off.
Oh my gosh.
She also, asks who is Gus, and he's like, this is Dr. Wong, and she's like, you're a Wong, and he's like, oh, my father was Irish, and your mother wasn't.
Solid joke.
So she immediately is starting to see through to Gus, and that's when we also see that Murray calls back. Gus answers the phone, and he's like, how do I know this is Gus? And he's like, well, when I see you, I'm going to rip every single hair out of your ball sack.
Yeah.
He's like,
Gussie.
So that's when he tells him, they got a boat, but the woman's an ex-con, and Gus, by this point, has lost it. He's laughing. He's like, because the news just keeps coming, and he's like, she's an ex-con, and he's like, what's going on?
Of course she is. Of course she is.
What else? And he's like, well, the boat needs work, and he's like, how long is that going to take? And he's like, hour and a half. Hour. You have an hour.
1 hour.
So that's when we see the police have also started going house-to-house searches, which is something Jesse mentioned earlier that could happen.
Yeah, because after roadblocks and curfew, the next step would be house-to-house searching.
Stopping at the Christmas party where George's Santa is, and that's when we see that he's gotten into the champagne. He's feeling good. He's like, I'd love to toast these officers, because the cops are like, well, isn't it cool to see Santa? I'm so happy I got to see him.
Yeah.
And that's when he toasts them, and the kid's like, Santa doesn't drink champagne. Santa drinks milk and cookies. George lays into this kid and basically says, Santa's lactose intolerant, and if he keeps drinking milk and cookies, you want Santa farting down everybody's chimneys? And the kid is just scared as all get out.
Yeah, he's because he's drunk and angry.
And then he goes, pulls his beard down, shoots the champagne back.
Yeah.
So good.
Legend.
So at the house, we have come to probably one of the most famous scenes in the movie because dinner has commenced.
dear Lord.
And dinner is in honor of Saint Lucia, who was a woman who gave her dowry to the poor people at her village, causing her husband, who wanted to marry her, or causing her husband to be enraged and sentence her to be burned at the stake. But she was so, Carolyn says, so powerful that the flames surrounded her and she did not burn. So then they had to stab her to death with spears.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a fairy tale.
This Christmas dinner is nothing that you would expect. They also have these crowns on their head that are ivy that have freaking candles in them,
Yeah,
like
4
large
candles each on top of their heads.
And that's when, she tells them, like, why they're wearing this. And, of course, Mother Rose is like, I don't care what it is. My forehead's blistering.
Yeah, I won't be wearing that.
So she takes it off, and we just see the food. Everybody starts getting into it. And Mother Rose begins to question Gus about, what school did you come from and all this stuff. And that's when there's so much dialogue in this scene, it's hard to keep track.
It's nuts, but they're all picking at these weird, like, Cornish game hens that they each have one of, and lutefisk and all this stuff just around. And they're basically talking about the therapy that they're going through.
Yeah.
But at the same time, Gus is constantly controlling the conversation.
And that's when Connie even asks him, what's the plan? Where's Jesse? And Lloyd's like, oh, well, he's at a friend. And she's like, on Christmas Eve. And Gus is like, well, that was my idea, because when one is constructing highways of communication between two people, it's good to clear the road and introduce exit signs. And Connie goes, that's interesting. I think I heard the same thing on Oprah a couple weeks ago.
Maybe. I love that too, because that you just got outed, Gus.
Yeah.
You watch Oprah.
So Mother Rose asks if they've discussed Carolyn's adultery, causing Carolyn to get pissed. And she's like, you told your mother? And Rose is like, well, why wouldn't he tell me? He was distraught and he had to come to his mother. So she goes to leave the table and Gus is like, Carolyn? And Connie's like, is that a rule that she can't leave? So that's when Carolyn just grabs a bottle of wine, pours herself a tall glass, and is just like, yeah, Dr. Wong, why don't you tell us all about your procedures?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's so good.
So Gus bullshits for a bit, and that's when Mother Rose tells her of her marriage being chosen because there were two families that wanted to join farms, and that's when is it Connie that's like, well, what or Gus is like, what farms? And Carolyn goes, pig farms. So Lloyd asks, for more wine, and Carolyn says, oh, we're out. I got to go to the kitchen and get more. So Gus goes to join them, and that's when he goes to take off his hat or his crown, and he burns himself. He goes, just eat your goddamn dinner.
Yeah, just eat your goddamn dinner.
So Gus joins them in the kitchen, and that's when she's like, I can't believe you told your mother. And he's like, what was I supposed to do? And, that's when Gus is like, your mother's a fucking bitch. Like, just lays into it.
Yeah. He's like, you're not supposed to take sides. He's like, she's a bitch.
She's a bitch, Lloyd. So he's like, we got to keep up appearances. We'll just get through the dinner and figure it out from there. Meanwhile, George is so drunk at the party that he is being kicked out. The family's on the porch and they're just like, I can't believe you, George. Like, go home. And the kid's like, Santa was mean to me.
So and he walks out of their front step and then takes a piss.
Yeah.
Right in front of their yard.
Santa, maybe Santa won't come back here. Maybe you can eat your own lousy cooking. Maybe Santa will take a flight with the Easter Bunny to fucking Cancun. And pisses and bumps his dick in the bush because he goes, ow.
And I love that when he pees, because they have like this massive steam
come up,
spew up in front of him as he pees in the bush.
Yeah. So back at the house, Carolyn is now sharing the adult version story of her and Lloyd's life together. And that's when Lloyd is like, honey, why don't you eat something? And she goes, why don't you eat me?
So she's really drunk.
She's really drunk at this point. So Connie tells her, kids go in the living room. This is not a conversation for children. And Rose is like, well, this is not a conversation for adults either. So Carolyn, getting drunker, calls Lloyd a phony bastard as he's trying to get the situation under control. That's when Gus is like, Carolyn, shut up. And he tells everybody that they're going to go in the living room for coffee and dessert, and then they're going to open presents. Connie's like, well, we can't open presents. And he's like, why not? And he's like, well, we have to wait till Christmas. And he's like, well, you know what? Tonight we're going to open presents because we can do it whenever we want.
Because we're adults and we can do it whenever we want to.
And that's when she's kind of hit John throughout the movie. And he's like, if you hit that kid again, I swear to God, I'm going to stick that whole pig's head up your ass.
I love that. Like, because her son is just this little chubby kid.
Yeah.
And she keeps whacking him with her hand. And he's like, you hit that kid one more time, just shove that whole pig up your ass.
So that's when Mother Rose goes into the living room and she's like, where's my portrait over the fireplace? In the kitchen, Carolyn is like basically, telling Gus that she doesn't care anymore. And that's when Gus has to remind her that Jesse's upstairs and he'll take him with him if she keeps acting like this.
Yeah. We have to worry about him.
So that's when we see Carolyn kind of sober up. She takes a glass of water. And then we cut to the living room where we see they're sitting down for dessert. The coffee comes out, and she's like, what's that? And she's like, oh, it's a such and such and such. And Mother Rose goes, sounds too sweet. So Carolyn, who has this plate literally like 2 feet above the table, is just like, well, then don't eat it.
And just drops it.
Splashes whipped cream all over Carrie.
I love it. Then don't eat it.
So that's when, Gus is like, well, how about a little music? So they put on some Nat King Cole. They start passing out presents. We see that Mary from Mother Rose has gotten a really ugly sweater with a poodle on it.
Hideous sweater.
She got Connie slipper socks, which she's like, oh, slipper socks. I've always wanted them.
And she whispers, she's like, what is she going to do? Be buried with it?
And Gary's like, I think that's the idea.
Yeah, I think that's the plan.
So she gets to a present that is from Lloyd, and that's when Carolyn does not want the gift from Lloyd. Gus tries to intervene once more, and Rose speaks up, and she's like, Carolyn's just a nasty, selfish woman who thinks only of herself, ruining my poor boy, blah, 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 blah. And Carolyn's like, why don't you sleep with him and just save everybody all the hassle?
It was something like, why don't you sleep with him and spare the rest of us?
Spare the rest of us.
And even Gus just goes, damn.
And that's when Lloyd uses the moment to announce, Carolyn, what does this matter anyway? You've made up your mind. And everybody's like, what's going on? He's like, Carolyn and I are ending our marriage. She's getting a divorce. She's leaving. And that's when Carrie goes, well, why?
One of the funniest moments. Why?
So we see that Jesse upstairs is getting more and more loose out of his binds. He falls over the chair. We cut back downstairs as Mother Rose is given a wallet from from Gary's family, and that's when Lloyd's like, "Here, this is to put in the wallet. It's the next payment on the house." And she says,
"Oh, well, we'll have to see what interest rates are in the new year."
And that's when Carolyn, under her voice, says, "Cocksucker."
To have a loan with your family with that high of an interest rate.
Yeah.
And then it's a variable interest rate.
Yeah.
Like she could renegotiate the rate. There's a level of cruelty I don't even understand.
So the two get into it once again because Mother Rose is like, what did she say? And that's when Gary goes to repeat it, and Connie elbows him.
He's about to say it, and she stops him.
So Carolyn basically lays into her. She's like, why do we keep living under the shadow with this one? Why? Because she has money, and you got one kid that can't say boo to his wife, another one that's afraid to take any chances. And that's when Lloyd takes the opportunity, and he's like, or she mentions that you get one bad review in one bad magazine, and you say that's in with the restaurant. Lloyd's like, it wasn't one bad review in one bad magazine. When the Guidebook of New York recommends you to a group of Hindus out looking for a night out of fasting, what do? Change the menu? Close the restaurant.
Yeah, and she disagrees. She thinks you stand up to it.
Yeah, because that's when he ran home to mom, and that's when she got shut out. Jessie got shut out. She can't live like this. She'd rather be tattooed, working in a bar, than living with a corpse. And that's when Lloyd approaches her to set the record straight, and he's like, wait, I want you to remind you of something. Before you go, like, the decision was left up to me. I didn't want to take the money. You were the one that said we should. And she's like, no, that's not true. And he's like, yeah, it was. We were sitting in our apartment on such and such street. We were smoking a joint and listening to Al Green. And that's when Connie's had it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, go ahead, please.
Yeah, she's like, I've had it. This is a Christmas of hearing about people getting stabbed and affairs and weed. And, I just can't take it anymore. And that's when Gus tells her to shut up once again. And Lloyd continues that, Carolyn didn't want to work. They were up to their ears in debt. And that's when Rose goes, what difference does it make? You're both getting divorced anyway.
And she's so happy when she says it.
Yeah. And that's when Lloyd says, Mother, is it possible for you to shut the fuck up for 5 seconds?
Oh my God, it's so good. It's so satisfying.
Before this, though, while they were getting into it, Lloyd walks over to the Christmas tree with a fire poker.
Yeah, and he basically, how you tap a glass to get attention?
Yeah.
Well, he's whacking the tree saying, excuse me.
Ornaments flying everywhere.
The corpse still has the floor. I love that line.
They were up to their ears in debt, and, what's his difference? And that's when she's like, you can't say that to me. And he's like, you know what, Mom? You know what I'm going to get you for next Christmas? A big wooden cross. That way, when you feel so underappreciated for all your sins and tributes, you can climb up to it and nail yourself to it.
Perfect. So perfect.
Good. So that's when Mother Rose is like, Gary, get my bags. I'm leaving. And that's when Connie's like, get them yourself. And she's like, who the hell do you think you are? Slipper socks. Medium. So that's when she tries to go upstairs. The doorbell rings once again. Mother Rose is going up the steps. Gus looks out and sees that Siskel is there now.
Yeah, he's like, what is it? The military?
Army, what am I, fucking Oswald?
Yeah, Army, what am I, fucking Oswald? I love that line.
So he goes to grab Mother Rose. She starts elbowing him. He puts his hand over her mouth, puts a gun to her head, and that's when Connie's like, is this also part of the therapy? Because the family's surrounded the stairs at this point. So that's when he says, everybody into the den, and that's when we see Jesse is now free, hears that Siskel is downstairs. He's telling Carolyn and Lloyd about the blackmail. In the den, Gus is against the door with his gun still out, listening, and we see that John and Mary have tied up both Gary, Connie, and Rose, and also John is just wrapping endless rolls of tape around his mom's mouth.
Yeah, he's like, hey, that's enough.
That's enough.
Like, are you sure it'll
It's a
hold?
hold?
The kids are so happy to just gag their parents.
And Mother Rose going off on Gus. She's like, I knew you were a fraud. I knew you were this. You'll never get away. You have, people just like you, want to get away because they don't want to tell how small their penises are.
Yeah, she just rips into him in every way, like from your shoddy shoes to your ridiculous haircut.
Yeah, you'll either be captured or killed. One less burden in society. And that's when he's like, lady, I'd like to tie you to the back of a fucking truck. And she says, you don't have the balls. And that's when Lloyd has to intervene because Gus is just about to wail on her.
It's so funny, though, because he's holding back. He's like, don't do it. She's not worth it.
She's not worth it.
I just hate her so much. I know.
Mary,
it's so good.
Gag your grandma.
Oh, great. There's so many quotable moments in this movie, and Mary, gag your grandma is one of them.
And that's when Gus is like, I don't get it. Like, I thought mothers are supposed to be sweet, forgiving. I know loan sharks that are more forgiving than you, lady. Your husband's not dead. He's hiding.
I love that line.
So the three walk off to find Jesse, who is in his room getting the money out. This is the first time now that Lloyd and Carolyn have seen the money, and Lloyd's like, can I ask you one thing? And he's like, sure, Dad. And he's like, what do you need all that money for? Basically starts yelling at him again, and Carolyn tries to intervene, and that's when Jesse's like, no, I've had it. Gus, take me with you.
He's livid. He's knocked some things off the desk. He says, like, what is it? What is it? More video games? Are you on drugs?
Yeah.
And he's just not listening.
Yeah.
He's doing the rageful dad shtick.
Yeah. So he's like, Gus, I'm coming with you. And he's like, what am I, the circus? I'm not taking you with me.
What am I, the fucking circus?
So that's when the doorbell sounds again, and Carolyn stays with Jesse, and she's like, stay here. We'll talk about this. And he's like, whatever happens to me or dad. And he's like, what, are you guys getting a divorce? And she's like, we'll talk about it. It's not your concern. He's like, actually, it is my concern. Like, I'm part of the family, I want you guys to be happy. And she's like, I want to stay. Your dad wants to get divorced. Well, what do you want? And this whole time, Gus is like, Carolyn, come on. And she's like, we'll figure this out. And he's like, well, what about Siskel? She's like, we'll figure something out. We'll give him the money back. We'll give him the negatives back. And she goes downstairs. So the three of them are going downstairs, but they're stopped because we hear somebody go, hey. And we find out that an inebriated George, still in the Santa Claus gear, is in the house. And
he just let himself in.
He's having another drink. And he's like, my wife thinks that you guys don't like us, even though every year we give you a fruitcake. Wait a minute. You had a gun. Didn't you?
Yeah, it's so great because they're about to walk to the door, and then when they see him, he just puts the gun
behind his back.
He's like, you had a gun. And he was like, no, me, no. And then he's like,
you're the guy they're looking for. You're the guy they're looking for.
Yeah, but then he gets angry.
Yeah. He's like, just calm down, and he points the gun on me. He's like, you're going to point a gun on me? You can't beat me up. I'm Santa Claus. So he charges him. Gus lays him out with one punch, and Gus goes, great, I just beat up Santa Claus.
Quite a rare night for Gus.
So more cops now are arriving at the house. Jesse comes downstairs and says the house is surrounded. What are they going to do? We could hide him in the mudroom. There's hostages all over. Like Gus and they're going back and forth. Meanwhile, Lloyd's looking out the front. We see him thinking. They go back and forth for a couple minutes, and that's when he's like, Jesse, take him through the path through the woods that they had mentioned earlier about the docks. And he's like, path through the woods. And Jesse's surprised. He's like, his dad's helping this criminal and he can't believe it. And that's when Lloyd even says, I can't keep sending everybody I care about to prison.
Which is awesome because he's acknowledging that sending Jesse
to military
away
school,
was not the perfect way to go.
So Jesse agrees to it, and they go to run off, and that's when George is like,
Well, the other thing that's really important about that sequence is he's also trusting Jesse to come home.
Yeah. Yeah.
And trusting Gus to an extent as well, which I love.
Yeah. So that's when we stop for a second and we see the cops are going up to the house. They look through the window and they're like, we got a couple of bogeys. They open the door and we see that Carolyn and Lloyd are now tied up with gags in their mouth. They remove the gags and they just start bickering again, just like they did before. Like, thank God you're here. He took off, blah, 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 blah. He went this way. No, he was going that way. They're just going at it again. And that's when the cops are like, excuse us. Are there any other hostages in the house? And the two of them look at each other and go, no.
But it's perfect because this is what was the problem from the beginning. So now they're just fighting and bickering And to slow the
To
cops
draw the
down,
attention of the
basically.
cops,
Well,
yeah.
and to keep them from getting any information.
So that's when we see Jesse and Gus, who is now disguised in the Santa outfit, are running through the snow, going through the woods. Lloyd and Carolyn back are getting untied, and they're feeding the cops a bullshit story that he was going to Yugoslavia. There is no Yugoslavia anymore, all this stuff.
No, he said he was going to get a private plane. She's like, no, he said he was going to Vancouver, where they just keep going and going and going.
And that's when the cops are like, excuse me. And they're like, oh, you want us to come down and give our statements? And all the cops are like, no.
No.
Yeah, Merry Christmas.
No, Merry Christmas. You have a good one. Yeah.
So that's when Gus and Jesse make it to the docks. Right as they do, the cop car with Phil and his other cadet come through, and they're like, George, it's after curfew. Go home. Home, George. Home. So Jesse wishes Gus
so
well,
good.
and he's like, I think things are going to be different with Mom and Dad. Now, if they're not, I'll blackmail him. See you,
God,
Gus.
I love that kid.
And that's when he goes to walk away, and Gus goes, see you, kid. I'm never having children.
Never having children.
So back at the house, Carolyn and Lloyd now at the bottom of the steps enjoying a glass of wine, and he's like, well, what are we going to do? And she's like, should we untie him? No, we'll wait till the morning. It'll be more festive that way.
It'll be more festive that way.
And she goes, no, I was actually talking about us. And that's when Lloyd gives it a second, goes in for a kiss. They're getting ready to kiss, and that's when John comes out and he goes, I hate to interrupt, but Grandma is eating through her gag.
Oh, such a friggin' quotable movie.
So the movie ends as we see Murray and Gus and the woman on the boat sailing away, and that's when Gus is like, you're a real piece of work, I'll say that, get out of the way. And that's when Murray is like, Gus, when we gonna open presents? And that's when Gus goes into a tirade and he goes, presents, I'll tell you about presents. I'll tell you what, I'll save you the trouble. Basically, he's gonna put him into a cannon, he's gonna shoot him out, he's gonna go collect the ashes, he's gonna put him on his fireplace, go back to his house and watch the Charlie Brown Christmas special while he drinks a gallon of whiskey.
Yeah, he's like, that's what I'm going to do. Ah!
The whole tirade. And that's when Murray's like, Gus, what's that smell? Shut up. And that, my friends, is 1994's The Ref.
Cannot say enough positive things about this movie.
Absolutely.
I just love it. Every time I watch it, I love it more. It's funny. It's heartwarming. It's comforting.
Yeah.
It's everything I want from a movie.
So would you like to know some fun things about the film?
Maybe.
Fun-ish. So what do you think the budget was? Even though you probably just saw it.
I actually did. I saw that one, so I'm not going to guess.
So estimated at $12 million is the budget. It comes out March 13th, 1994.
That makes fucking sense.
Yeah. Brings in opening weekend $3 million. Overall grosses in U.S. and Canada about $11 million.
Yeah, so flop.
It flopped, yeah. It was shot in Ontario, Canada during the fall of 1993.
Hey, I called it.
You did. The film's premise came from former copywriter Mary Weiss after a fight with her husband, the producer Jeff Weiss. She later admitted the fight prompted an interesting scenario in her mind. When two people in the middle of an argument can't agree on anything, wouldn't it be interesting if a third party could come in and mediate? Even with the idea of a marriage counselor, Weiss came up with the notion of a street-smart criminal who unwillingly becomes a bickering couple's voice of reason. While it was Weiss's first screenplay, her ace in the hole happened to be a relative who also was an Oscar-nominated screenwriter, her brother-in-law, Richard Logan-Grace, who nabbed the nomination a few years earlier for The Fisher King.
Okay, yeah.
When the first, 2 seconds. While Richard started as just a consultant offering notes and ideas to his sister-in-law, when the first draft was in good shape, they took it to Touchstone Pictures, Disney's live-action division. Their pitch was so effective, the studio approved the project within 20 minutes, but with one big caveat, of which the studio had any serious notes on the script, it would be up to Richard to revise it.
Okay. I mean, that makes sense.
So according to Richard, he worked on the screenplay for a year with Disney's notes being described as unending. He finished the first draft and washed his hands of it, even telling the execs he was done working on it. Denis Leary had signed a 3-picture deal with Disney, and his collaborator, Ted Demme, brought the screenplay to Leary. Leary and Demme liked it so much, they brought Richard back to revise the script, who continued working on the script throughout the production, which due to the film being mostly shot in sequence.
Okay, I mean, that makes sense.
The Ref was J.K. Simmons' film debut, as he made a name for himself on the Broadway stage before this. Of course, his character Siskel was a dig at film critic Gene Siskel, who'd given the Fisher King screenplay a big thumbs down back in 1991.
Nice.
Gene Siskel would go on to state it felt that it was a strange form of revenge and wondered if his name being said over and over again wasn't ultimately a distraction for audiences, adding he wished someone like Jack Nicholson would have played him in the role. Siskel did not mention the personal poke during the television show when they reviewed the movie.
Well, that's nice, I guess.
Yeah. The character of Gus's facial hair in the movie was supposedly controversial. The reason, said a source on set of the film, then Disney chief Jeffrey Katzenberg allegedly hated facial hair. Just any facial hair rubbed him the wrong way. If that is indeed true, Leary and Demme got away with one because Gus's particular goatee ends up being rather memorable.
Yeah, well, I mean, it gives Leary it makes him not just Denis Leary, because Denis Leary generally was clean shaven.
In the original ending, Gus allows himself to be caught by the police in order to send a message to Jesse, to whom he's taken a liking to. The message being, this is the life you're headed towards if you don't change. Test audiences hated that ending and wanted to see Gus escape, so the studio quickly shot the ending we see in the film where Gus goes free and everyone lives happily ever after. Sometime later, Demme and Leary would express disappointment that they went with the happier ending, having preferred the original ending more.
I don't know how I'd feel about that original ending.
I would like to see it. It's never been released, I don't think.
I don't think we're ever going to see that.
Yeah, probably not. Disney strangely decided not to save The Ref for a holiday season release, instead opening it in the middle of March 1994. The film was released to only 700 theaters instead of a genuine wide release. During its box office run, the largest theater count was 861, making a little over $11 million. It later found a wider audience through home video and cable TV airings, becoming a cult movie and an alternative to the traditional Christmas movie during the holiday season.
That checks out to me.
Denis Leary's line, "Lady, your husband ain't dead, he's hiding," is a direct quote of a line from the classic Abbott and Costello routine, Susquehanna Hat Company, that was immortalized in the film Society in 1944.
Oh, okay.
When released in the United Kingdom, The Ref was retitled Hostile Hostages.
That's a good title, too.
Yeah,
It works.
The film's name, Chasseur, is French for hunter.
Oh,
French
Huguenot.
Although they come close a couple of times, Carolyn and Lloyd never kiss throughout the movie.
Yeah,
When Denis Leary shoots the smoke detector to stop it from beeping, it is the only time his gun is fired in the entire film.
Which makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be weird if he killed the Santa.
Yeah. On the film's movie poster and video cover, Denis Leary's legs are the exact same length, even though one is bent.
Hey. Wait a second.
The Ref appeared on Entertainment Weekly's list of 50 best movies you've never seen in July 16th of 2012 issue. And in the year 2000, the American Film Institute included The Ref in the list of 500 movies nominated for the top 100 funniest American films.
I think that's earned. I really do.
So what are your final thoughts on 1994's The Ref?
Oh, it's a buy it.
Yeah,
it's a classic. Especially it's aged so well now. I'm confident that it belongs in your movie collection.
It absolutely
just does.
Yeah. No, it's a buy it for me as well. This is one of those movies that if you haven't seen, you're doing yourself a disservice. It's so much fun. It's one that you will come back to for the one-liners, for the jokes that you love so much. And also, it's a great performance by Leary that I feel like he doesn't get to do a lot of really good dramatic stuff that sticks for more. So like Rescue Me is like one of the biggest that I can think of.
Well, it's a pretty big one, but I know what you mean.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a buy it for me. As you know, we always like to end the show with a couple of recommendations. My two this week, starting off with the first one, is 1994's Trapped in Paradise, which is currently on Tubi. The synopsis says, residents of a friendly Pennsylvania town foil three brothers' plan to rob a bank on Christmas Eve, and the three brothers happen to be Nicolas Cage, Dana Carvey, and John Lovitz.
It's a pretty damn fun one, and it's a bit of a lost gem.
It is the lost gem, absolutely. Second to that is Mixed Nuts from 1994, currently available on Peacock. The events focus around a crisis hotline business on one crazy night during the Christmas holidays. Steve Martin, Liv Schreiber, oh my God, I'm blanking on her name. Madeline Kahn, a bunch of people in this one, even Gary Shandling.
That's one that's really kind of unknown.
Yeah.
And great.
Yeah.
Really fun one.
Really fun one.
Really great flick.
What is your recommendation?
None of your fucking business.
Oh, is that so?
Well, no. Okay. I don't want you to open it until Christmas.
Fair.
No, I'm going to go with 2003's Bad Santa.
Makes sense.
Because it's a criminal who turns out to be not such a bad guy.
Yeah.
It's very Christmas focused. I would say this has to be a 10 out of 10 on the Christmas scale.
Absolutely.
Simply because it's about a Santa Claus. It's about Christmas, about learning to not be a piece of shit and to love and to care. And the synopsis IMDb gives is: a miserable con man and his partner pose as Santa and his little helper to rob department stores on Christmas Eve, but they run into problems when the con man befriends a troubled kid. That's actually a solid one.
It's a really good one.
It's available right now on Paramount Plus to watch, and it's a perfect Christmas movie.
It's a great one.
It really is.
And I would recommend the sequel as well if you like the first one.
The sequel's pretty good.
Fun.
But the first one is just, it's Excelsior.
Oh, it's great.
It's so good. It's so quotable. Not quite as quotable as The Ref, but up there. The ref is painfully quotable. Painfully quotable.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I would say Bad Santa from 2003. If you haven't seen it, or if you haven't seen it in a while, put it on. You'll be glad you did.
Or find Badder Santa, the unrated version.
Well, I mean, duh.
So do we have any emails this week by chance?
Who cares? No, I'll check right now.
All right.
Let's see. We do have one that I know of.
Okay. Getting all Tarzan over there on me.
You know what? I'm amazed I only coughed like 80 times.
Proud of you.
This is from our good buddy Trank.
Oh, awesome.
The subject is zombies.
Okay.
Still digging the show, thanks to you guys. I love zombie movies and saw a preview for Pride, Prejudice, and Zombies. Do you gentlemen think it's worth a watch? Trank.
No, Trank. We saw it in theaters.
We were not a fan.
Did we see it opening night?
Yeah, I think so.
I think so, yeah.
We did not love that one.
It's a lot of Pride and Prejudice and some zombies.
Yeah, it was surprisingly lacking in the zombie space for me.
Yeah.
I would say if you're looking for a zombie movie that's on the funnier side,
Lisa Frankenstein is pretty good.
That was pretty fun.
Yeah.
I liked Lisa Frankenstein. If you haven't seen like Train to Busan,
yeah.
I know subtitles can be an issue for some people, but it's so worth it.
You will cry.
Yeah, that's a really great one.
If you're looking for the humorous route like Pride and Prejudice, I know you're not a fan, but I really like Fido from 2003.
I should revisit Fido, but I didn't like it when I first saw it.
Fido,
but
Fido's
a lot of people love Fido.
Yeah.
Those are probably better zombie recommendations.
Yeah.
If you want, silly fun, it's worth revisiting Return of the Living Dead 2.
Absolutely.
Always worth a revisit.
The first three, Return of the Living Dead 1, 2, and 3.
I meant 2 because of how silly it is.
How silly it is.
Yeah. I mean, 1 is a little funny, 2 is goofy, and then 3 is pretty serious. So, but they're all great. But yeah, I would say, if you watch it, let us know what you think. Maybe we're wrong. Maybe we need to give it another chance. But that was one of the few times we both walked out of the theater and just went,
We were kind of amped too. I mean, we
were
excited
stoked about it, not going to lie. So, but that is it for our emails. If you guys want to email us,
yes,
it's very easy. Just send an email to doyouevenmoviepod@gmail.com. Or go to doyouevenmovie.com and send an email through there. You can also comment if you're watching this on YouTube. But if you're watching on YouTube, also make sure you hit the like button and subscribe. Leave a comment with what you think of the film we talked about or anything else we've talked about on the show.
Absolutely.
And if you're listening via podcast, then make sure you're subscribed on your favorite podcasting app. And seriously, it makes a huge difference if you leave a review on Apple Podcasts or a star rating on Spotify. It really does make a big difference. We would appreciate the help very much, especially during the season of giving.
Yes.
Yeah, why you cut me off?
Too bad.
Fucker. So, but that's all I got.
Would you like to know what we're talking about next week as the holiday movie lineup continues?
Let me just...
I
hope it. Well, all I'll say, is I hope it's holly, jolly, bright, and light.
Well,
because we could use something lighthearted, right? With the darkness of winter and the sadness of the human condition. Give me something positive.
So we're gonna go with a dark Christmas film from 2005, one that I got to show you, even though technically you were the one that bought it, but I'd seen it before.
Yeah.
The Ice Harvest from 2005.
This movie's so good.
So good. Starring John Cusack, Billy Bob Thornton. You also have Randy Quaid.
Randy Quaid is at optimal levels of Quaid.
And, I almost forgot Oliver
Platt.
Yeah, Oliver Platt, and this is so good. Currently available on Prime and Vudu to rent. It is not streaming anywhere, unfortunately, for free.
This one is absolutely worth renting.
Yeah.
Ice Harvest. I mean, if you want a just pulse-pounding Christmas thriller,
neo-noir
kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not going to get that very often.
No.
This one is absolutely worth it.
Yeah, this is a good one, and if you have not seen it, I would absolutely recommend checking it out before we talk about it, because the spoilers in it are pretty strong.
Well, I mean, that movie, trust me.
Yeah.
So, with all of that said, I guess it's time to wrap up.
I would say so.
Wrap up, because Christmas is full of hip-hop music.
Yeah.
So, appreciate you guys checking us out, and make sure you're subscribed. We'll see you guys next Tuesday. You do smell like cat piss.
Oh, well, it needs to be.